And so obviously you need to desensitize the Islamic world to these concepts. They need to get habitualized to the idea that their religious rules don't apply to everyone else in the world.
When I came to this country, I enrolled in a language course to study the local language. There were other students there, some of them Muslim. The girls wore headscarves. And during the month of Ramadan, when it is forbidden to eat, make sex, or smoke during the day, I go to the women's toilet, the ladies' room, and there was one of those Muslim girls with a headscarf, and she was smoking a cigarette. When she heard the door open, terrified, she put out the cigarette and ran out of the room. So I'm thinking, is Osama bin Laden the typical representative of that religion, or is it this girl?
In fact, the way you need to think about it is to remind yourself there is no Islam.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There are no Muslims. There is only the Quran, the Hadiths, and 1,000 different interpretations of them by people who think they are Muslims and who are suffering from the delusion that they are part of some unified, coherent religion. The same goes for Christians. The same can sometimes be said of atheists. None of us should be lumped. Don't you hate it when religious people tell you what you believe? The second thing you need is a Muslim version of Venom Fang X. One who thinks he understands science, but clearly doesn't. A Muslim who clearly believes the crazy shit. So your critics cannot say, hey, they don't really believe that. So let me introduce you to Sami Zaatari.
I'm going to simply read from the very article that thunderf00t referenced. The link he provides debunks his very own thesis. Can you believe that? The article he provides debunks his very own argument. For hundreds of years, while Europe was mired in the Dark Ages, the medieval Islamic empire was at the forefront of science, in sad contrast to the state of many Muslim countries today. Jim Al-Khalili asks, what has been impeding progress? So wait a minute. According to the article that thunderf00t just referenced, there was a time when Muslims, an Islamic empire, basically an Islamic theocracy, which thunderf00t is so against, which thunderf00t claims keeps us backwards, the age of religion. According to this article, during the age of religion, the Islamic empire and Islamic theocracy, while Europe was in the Dark Ages, the Muslims were at the forefront of society, the forefront of science. But wait a minute. According to thunderf00t, Islam is anti-science. It keeps Muslims backwards. It keeps Muslims from contributing to society. But wait a minute. This article says that Muslims were at the forefront of science and Islamic empire. Am I missing something here?
Yes, Sammy, you are missing something. You are missing everything Jim Al-Khalili wrote after the first paragraph. For example, you missed this. It is sad but true that today many religions around the world see modern scientific disciplines such as cosmology or evolution as undermining their belief systems. How about you, Sammy? Do you understand and accept evolution? Or do you think evolution is just an attempt to undermine religion? Here's another part you missed. Of course, scientific researchers require adequate financial resources, but to compete on the world stage requires more than just the latest, shiniest equipment. The whole infrastructure of the research environment needs to be addressed, from laboratory technicians who understand how to use and maintain the equipment, to the exercise of real intellectual freedom on the part of scientists and the healthy skepticism and courage to question experimental results. What do you think he means by skepticism? Should that same skepticism be applied to religious claims? He goes on. This cultural change will not happen overnight and requires not only political will, but also an understanding of the true meaning of both academic freedom and the scientific method itself. Sadly, this can often be somewhat lacking, even in the West. An understanding of the scientific method. How about you, Sammy? Do you understand the scientific method? Do you know that the scientific method is rooted in methodological naturalism? Do you know what that is, Sammy?
If Thunderfoot was honest, he would have asked, like Jim al-Khalili, he would have asked, why are Muslims today not at the forefront of science as they were back then?
Yes, Sammy, Jim al-Khalili did ask why. But you missed the fact that in offering possible answers to that question, that one of the several suggested possible contributing factors was indeed the fear of many Muslims that science turns people into atheists. That fear is real. Jim al-Khalili would probably argue that it is unjustified, but I have got data that demonstrates that it is justified. Not only that, I will link one of your own videos where you have also expressed that same fear of science.
Don't teach them about evolution. Guide them in their natural belief in God.
First, let me show you some data that Jim al-Khalili never mentioned in his article. In the underbar, I have linked an article called Leading Scientists Still Reject God. That study found that among the top natural scientists, disbelief in God was almost total. This survey was done only in America, but I suspect it is a worldwide phenomenon. And I hardly need a survey to see that the scientific culture in the English-speaking world is highly atheistic. Francis Collins, himself a Christian, reluctantly admitted to this. That presents a problem for any theocracy that wants science. In order for a theocracy to maintain its power, a significant portion of the population has to buy into its doctrines and dogmas. And if some area of study threatens to undermine those dogmas, then naturally they will have a desire to repress them. Thus, the idea of a tolerant theocracy is necessarily an oxymoron. And that brings me to your video, Sammy. Don't teach evolution to children. Do you remember saying this?
Do not teach your children about evolution because, as this study shows, it is unnatural to the mind. In fact, if you teach children about evolution, that itself would amount up to indoctrination and brainwashing.
So there you go, Sammy. You are part of the problem. You don't want to teach children a certain science, evolution. You don't want to teach them that science because you think it leads to atheism. And you are right. Evolution does lead many people to atheism, enough of them that it will undermine a theocracy that rejects evolution. And evolution isn't the only science that cuts at the very foundation of theology. Cognitive neuroscience cuts even deeper. These sciences didn't exist during your Islamic Golden Age, but they do now. Your Islamic Golden Age is backwards compared to the present. To look backwards to such an ignorant Golden Age is to be held backwards. Now, back to Thunderfoot. As you can see, I do agree with your basic conclusion. Theocracies are bad news for the modern world, and fundamentalism anywhere is going to hold back science. We need to bring them to an end. However, I do not agree with the arguments you use to reach that conclusion. For example, I do not agree with this.
I mean, really, contesting the correlation and causation thing is only a matter of interest if there's a point of contention on the subject.
There were several points of contention raised in the videos criticizing you, Thunderfoot. By saying what you've just said, you have just lied by implying no such points of contention were raised.
I mean, when someone says that smoking causes cancer, how many people would regard just simply saying correlation doesn't equal causation as a killer argument for dismissing all the evidence on the subject.
Correlation is not enough to establish causation. Theists often use correlation arguments, and we reject them for the same reason we must reject your argument, even though I think your conclusion is partially correct. At best, correlation is a mere starting point. It may represent some data that needs to be explained. I'll let David Deutsch explain why that is.
In science, two false approaches blight progress. One's well-known, untestable theories. But the more important one is explanation-less theories. Whenever you're told that some existing statistical trend will continue, but you aren't given a hard-to-vary account of what causes that trend, you're being told a wizard did it. When you're told that carrots have human rights because they share half our genes, but not how gene percentages confer rights, wizard. When someone announces that the nature-nurture debate has been settled because there's evidence that a given percentage of our political opinions are genetically inherited, but they don't explain how genes cause opinions, they've settled nothing. They're saying that our opinions are caused by wizards, and presumably so are their own. That the truth consists of hard-to-vary assertions about reality is the most important fact about the physical world. It's a fact that is itself unseen, yet impossible to vary.